Well, hello with Gratitude Matt listeners. Bill Moran here, and I'm excited to be back with you once again. This is our first show of 2026. Our goal remains to inspire more people to practice gratitude on a regular basis. Before I welcome our guest, I have a few announcements. With Gratitude Matt is excited to announce that we have a new website. The webpage is withgratitudemat.org. I encourage you to visit the website. It's a great way to stay connected with Gratitude Matt. You can sign up for our newsletter and you can follow what we're doing. We share announcements and we have an amazing catalog and collection of all of our podcasts. So you can go back and listen to your favorite episode, or you can listen to one of the episodes that you hadn't already listened to for a first time. So also we encourage you to follow us on Instagram and on Facebook. So again, I encourage you to go to withgratitudemat.org and check us out. Also, one further announcement before we get started with our guest. This summer, on July 24th, we will be hosting our second Toast to Gratitude at The View in Mount Adams in Cincinnati, Ohio. Information on how to sign up and be a part of this year's event will be released this spring. So please stay tuned to this exciting event, and there will be opportunities for you to volunteer. There will be opportunities for you to attend, and there'll be opportunities to you to be a sponsor. So stay tuned. So without further ado, hello, Tracie. How are you
Hello,
today?
Bill. I am wonderful. How are you?
Yes. So our guest today is Tracie Burress, and I'm humbled and honored to have her here today. Tracie came to us via our good friend, our mutual friend, Mike Need. And Mike and Tracie started their careers together in Philadelphia shortly after college. And among many things, Tracie is a business leader and an award-winning sales superstar, a mom, an author, an inventor, an entrepreneur, and most of all, Tracie, you're a woman of faith.
Absolutely.
So welcome to With Gratitude, Matt.
I am so very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So tell our listeners just, it kind of start from the beginning a little bit and just tell us about your childhood and where you grew up and a little bit about your family.
Yes. Well, I am originally from Chicago, Illinois, south side of Chicago. But I will say that I'm somewhat of an anomaly because I grew up on the south side, but my dad raised me a Cubs fan. So I know I'm automatically kind of
There
weird
you
to a
go.
lot of people right there. But yeah, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, grew a product of the inner city, Chicago public schools. I grew up with my dad, my mom, my brother, sister. I have an older brother, older sister. I went to Kenwood Academy High School, and just kind of grew up with the grit of being, a young Black girl growing up in the inner city.
Right. And you lived a very exciting life. You and your father were very close, and
Yeah.
as you grew up, your father was um, he was from the South, correct?
Yes. So, my dad grew up in Morehead, Mississippi. Okay, which Mississippi, even present day, still have a lot of opportunity areas in terms of just education. People, living above the poverty line. And my dad, grew up there. He was really not even allowed to go to school. His job was to pick cotton. He had 12 siblings, and I don't think any of them had any formal education. And he would tell me about his days of literally picking cotton and having to have so much cotton by the end of the day to be able to, say that they, completed their job satisfactorily. So, people think that the disparity between, people that are educated and uneducated, was so long ago. But literally, my dad had to pick cotton as a child, as well as his siblings, which are, my aunt and uncle. And so he had a very limited education, but always, the great migration for a lot of blacks in the South were to move to the North. Okay. And so he eventually moved to Detroit because he had a sister, then eventually landed in Chicago. But he had a very, very strong Southern dialect where a lot of people couldn't understand him or some of his siblings. And so, as a young person at like 5 or 6 years old, my father wouldn't leave the house without me. And it's kind of like the immigrant story that we think about today, where the young child is doing all the talking and there's the go between their parents because there's a language barrier. Fortunately, my father understood English, but he just couldn't articulate it. So that kind of started me as a, young 5-year-old to be very comfortable with talking to adults, very comfortable with articulating messages. And I just think that in some regard, that established our closeness, our relationship. I just feel like I felt responsible for him, and always worried about him. I mean, I can remember going to college in Atlanta and asking my dad to take me back to the airport. Well, he told me later that he got lost. Now, if this is gonna make me cry, he got lost coming back from
Oh,
O'Hare to the South Side because he couldn't read the signs.
oh,
That just got me, and it just made me really even more protective of him. And this is in 19, I went to college from 86 to 90, So
right,
I've always had this closeness with him. And we just understood each other.
right. Well, it was a beautiful relationship for so many reasons, and I also had the benefit, and just for the listeners, and we're going to encourage them to reach out and explore and discover your book,
Right.
Survive and Succeed. The full title is Survive and Succeed: From a Brain Aneurysm to Shark Tank, How to Trust in God's Plan. So I had the
Yes.
benefit of reading that book, and you're here today. And so I'm very familiar with that story that you shared. Um, and not it's not a lighter note, but it's another note on your childhood. You had a very unique experience, unique to
Yeah.
anybody I even known or met. When you were 5 years old, you're walking in Chicago, and strangers said something to you that
Yeah.
changed your childhood from a yeah, so tell a little bit about that.
Yeah.
That's great. That's amazing.
So when I was 4 or 5 years old, I was very, very young. My mom and I were walking down Michigan Avenue in Chicago, and some lady approached my mom and said, you should consider getting her into modeling. And so she's like, okay, so never really thought about it. Not many South Side girls are getting into modeling. And so, we didn't have a lot of money, but my uncle was a photographer, and he, set up his dining room, put a little backdrop. And I remember my mom got me a pretty dress, and long and short, I ended up modeling. I was a child model. I worked for Sears Catalog, J.C. Penney. And then one of my biggest claims to fame is that I was on a Betty Crocker Ready to Spread frosting commercial with the late Gary Coleman,
Oh,
of all people, because he also is from Chicago. He's from, I think, Zion, Illinois. And so I remember going and waiting and waiting, and he kept us all waiting because he wanted a limousine to pick him up. And they did, in fact. But this was, right before he really hit it big with Different Strokes and, some of the other things. But
yeah.
yeah, it
Oh,
was an
sure.
interesting experience because, I got to, do a lot of like print ad shoots, and, I would always go on auditions and stuff. And so it was a big deal. I was almost like a celebrity, in my own right. I remember teachers saying, "Oh, I got the star in my room this year, so I guess, you'll be missing a few days." And you don't realize the impact of that, and because of all that I've experienced, I kinda can see how some of my expectations were always centered around me just showing up and trying to be pretty and not having any more beyond that, in addition to that, which, I'm sure we'll talk about because you read my book.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think, and that's good for the listeners to kind of set the context here because, at a young age, uh, that maybe was your identity,
Yeah.
maybe even your worth was
Yep.
in your beauty.
Yep.
Obviously, you're so much more than that inside and out. You've grown,
Amen.
you've you've been through it all, and we'll
Yep.
we'll kinda talk about that, and there's so much to talk about. I guess, you mentioned the late, great Gary Coleman, and sadly, he did pass away from an aneurysm, and we gave the
Yes,
title of your book, and in 2011, um, you, I guess, woke up in the middle of the night and tell us what
I
happened.
did. So yeah, at 43 years old, I woke up and it was just a normal day. We had just given our son, it was his golden birthday, a birthday party. I think the last guest left around 10 o'clock, went to bed and woke up at exactly 5 a.m. I remember looking at the clock and I just felt like I had a stiff neck and I went into the guest room. No, actually, I went up, it took 2 ibuprofen because my first thought was, oh my God, these pillows, I need to go to TJ Maxx or Marshalls and get some more pillows tomorrow because this pillow is terrible. And so I ended up doing, taking 2 ibuprofen and then I went to lay back down. Then after that, I'm like, nah, this is a little bit more serious than, ibuprofen. So I went into the guest room because it's a little cooler in there. It kind of got a little hot. And as soon as I sat on the bed, all of a sudden I started seeing flashing lights. I heard a loud ring and then I heard a pop. And it felt like somebody was stabbing me with an ice pick on this side of my head. And I literally remember my Pentecostal grandfather saying, if you confess with your mouth that God is your savior, that you will go to heaven, that God is, he will save you. And so I remember being able to say, God, forgive me for all my sins. And I know that you are my personal savior. Soon as I said it, it stopped. I mean, literally to the point where I woke my ex-husband up. And at that point, and he's a medical doctor, so I remember grabbing his toe, walking back in the room. I said, "Something's really wrong." I had this stiff neck. I can do this, but I couldn't go up and down, can go back and forth, but not up and down. And, he just kind of started looking at my eyes and, whatever. And so I ended up going back to sleep for 4 more hours. Okay. So at this point, I wake up and he says, "Do you feel better?" He said, "Why don't you just take a shower and put, something in the back of it?" So I did that. Then, I said, "I'm not 100%. I feel better." He says, "Call your doctor." He said, "Actually, you know what? I'm going to call." So I call the doc. He calls the doctor, hands the phone to me. And then I just kind of tell her, this whole story in the beginning, ask God to forgive me for my sins. And then I just had the worst headache. And then so my ex is like, "You never said headache." I was like, "Well, it only lasted for like 10 seconds." It's like, "But you never said headache." And so he knew immediately that I had had a brain bleed, which the name is a subarachnoid hemorrhage. And most people don't survive. Once your brain bleeds, you stop and you drop, and it very rarely do you come back. And if you do come back, your deficits are so large because your brain is bleeding. And so, long and short, I was able to get airlifted from Rockford, Illinois, which is an hour and a half north of Chicago, to downtown to Northwestern University, where the next day they perform an 11-hour brain surgery. Now, my doctor, Bernard Bendock, who I actually just saw 2 years ago, he has now since left Northwestern for the sunny Arizona, and he started up the neurosurgery program there. And me being the person that I am, I'm like, "Hey, I need to come see you. I just want you to look at my brain again." Unfortunately, everything is
Good.
fine, but that was a very pivotal time for me, for on so many levels.
Yeah, yeah, and I think for our listeners here, um, you talked about Dr. Bendock and how he
Love
gave
him.
you hope, but also how your friends and your faith helped you through that. So maybe talk a little bit about your faith and your friends and that.
When
Yeah.
you are facing brain surgery, um, and then you're like, okay, well, what do you say to your friends? What do you say to your family? What do you say to your kids? Like, because you just don't know, brain and surgery are not two words from one the same sentence. And so I realized that all I could do was go to God. There is nothing else you can do but have faith. And I just remember praying and asking God to give me another chance to live the life that is pleasing to him. That's a phrase that I used to always say. I want to live a life that's pleasing to you, God, and give me the opportunity to do it. And I can tell you that I know that I am blessed to be here still. If I think about all the things I would have missed, I'm 57 now. That was at 43. And so I would have missed so much with my kids. And, another quick story is that my girlfriends, just surrounded me. They came and took care of my kids, made sure they were comfortable. Because as a mom or as a parent, you're sitting here dealing with your issue, but what's going on with the kids? My kids had a tutor and I had not canceled the tutor. I still want the tutor to come. My best friend was like, girl, your tutor's not coming today. She's like, the kids and I are coming to Chicago. I'm getting him. Like, I hadn't even told her because I wanted to, in my brain, have some semblance of normalcy, but that's ridiculous. And so that's when they showed up and they all came in, and just to pray for me before. And that was another reason why I wanted to do Northwestern, because I had, just my family is there, a good amount of my friends growing up were there. And when I can tell you, and Dr. Bendock came in to kind of draw, on a whiteboard, just where my aneurysm was and how they could not go and do it any other way outside of literally cutting up in my skull and going inside that way. I had about 20 people in the room and they were all friends and family. And afterwards he asked me, he literally said to me after the surgery and everything, he was like, I have been a doctor for so long, but because my ex was in the medical community, a lot of my girlfriends and friends are doctors too. And they're always doctors of like just one or two, three people would move. He says, I have never had so many people from all over the country say, hey, the person that you're operating on tomorrow, I know this person from that person. I just want to kind of tell you, he literally was like, who are you and how do you know so many people? And he just is such an amazing man. I just love Dr. Bendock. He just wanted to tell me that. He was like, I had so many people reach out, and pray for us and, say, I just want you to know that I know this young woman and take care of her or whatever. And he did. He absolutely did.
That's no, that's so special, and I mean, having that, faith community, having your friends
So
there, having
important.
the skill, the talent, and then also the humility of Dr. Bendock be a part of your surgery, 11-hour surgery and recovery, um,
Yes.
and we didn't really mention this, but or maybe you did, but, your son's birthday was a couple weeks before Christmas, right? So, did you
12/12.
make it home? Okay, there you go.
No,
So,
well,
did you
no.
make
So
it home
he
before
had
Christmas?
We did make it home for Christmas. My son's birthday was
Okay.
12/12. We had that party for his birthday, which was a surprise party, and then I
Oh.
was released on December 23rd, so 2 days
Oh,
before
wow.
Christmas.
Okay.
So I had been in there for 12
S
days, which,
Wow.
honestly, they did not anticipate me recovering as quickly as I did. Like, they have you in the ICU floor, and then they take you like 2 step downs. And so they at one point said, "You really shouldn't be on this floor because people on this floor are learning how to walk. They're learning how to talk, and I got a parade of people coming in, bringing me my favorite food, bringing me
Oh, wow.
snacks.
Okay.
We're watching TV, it's like, this is different. And so unfortunately, I got to go step down because I never had any deficits. I was never to a point where I had to have any kind of therapy, whether it was, physical, whether it was, speech, never ever, And so I remember telling people, had I known how serious this was, I don't even know if I would have prayed for what I got because it would have been almost too much to ask.
Right. Right.
Can you
And you
imagine?
mentioned your faith, and you've mentioned and your faith was so strong, while you're going through this, before you're going through this, but did you view this, successful surgery and recovery as a second chance at all?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it
Yeah.
was. I mean,
Yeah. No. Yeah.
and I mean, I
So what did that
know.
mean for you going s sorry,
No, go
I
on.
what did that
No,
mean for
no.
you going forward?
that meant that I could not waste this opportunity to let people know how good God is. That meant that I had to own up and make good on the promise that I made before my surgery to let the world know that God is real and that I'm no special, then He loves us all the same. So if He did it for me, He can do it for you, not to lose faith and to know that you can literally live a life that's pleasing to God. And so I wanted to own up and bring forth what I felt like God wanted me to do, and that is to be His disciple, and that is to be His messenger. So whenever I have a public stage, as it's my book says, from aneurysm to Shark Tank, it was intentional for me to tell the world about my brain aneurysm and tell the world about how God brought me back stronger and more feisty than ever, which was a blurb that ABC used when they were promoting Shark Tank. But it was true. And so it was very intentional in me letting everybody know as much as I could, or as many people as I could, and that's a big stage. I mean, come on now, we're still getting orders, and that we were on Shark Tank in 2015. Every time it plays, I still get orders. It's the gift that keeps on
That's
giving, but
great.
it's reaching so many people, and that was also my goal.
Yeah. So maybe kinda give the listeners a little bit more background. So, I'm familiar with sock tabs, but so, um, before you were on Shark Tank, how did that come about? You don't just call up Shark Tank and
No,
say,
you do
"Hey, I
not.
got a product.
Trust
Can I
me.
get on?"
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm an entrepreneur, I guess, in some sense. And I guess I didn't realize that about myself. But I used to watch Shark Tank just, because it was a Friday night show. I thought it was entertaining. And I just said, I want to be on Shark Tank. And I said it with blind confidence. And I said, I need to create a product that everybody can use. And just so happened with that mindset, because I really strongly believe in putting something out there. And in my world, I believe God, and some people will just say the universe will figure out a way to make it happen. And so when I put it out there that I'm going to be on Shark Tank, I want to be on Shark Tank. Did I have a product? No. But I had gone over to a few friends' houses the same weekend, and they both were complaining about matching or matchless socks. And one even had socks in the middle of their family room, right by like the fireplace, like it's a piece of furniture, where every morning, every day, they would sift through trying to find socks. I'm like, this is so dumb, you guys. There's got to be a better way. And so, long and short, I end up creating sock tabs. And my cousin, who also lives in Los Angeles, which is where I am right now, by the way, um, had a marketing and PR firm. And so we created the product. And the first time I went, I pitched in San Diego, and they were like, you had the best pitch like I've seen all day, but you don't have any sales. You don't even have a product. You don't even have a proof of concept. They were like, so come back. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm on. So I figured out a way to, come up with a logo and just all that we did. My cousin was very instrumental in all of that. So then I came back maybe 2 years later, maybe a year later, and my friend had a 50th birthday party, and something just said, check the website and see if Shark Tank is going to be there the exact same weekend. Imagine that. So literally the same weekend, I'm already there. They're having another open casting call in Las Vegas. So we fly in. My ex takes the stuff to the hotel. I go directly to the casting call, and if you get a bracelet, you're going to automatically be chosen. Now, about 50, by that time, 45,000 people, it's even worse now, probably 50 to 70,000 people get chosen. So I go there, and the guy that, selects people, he was like, I've seen a few of you all's, in the past, he looking right in my face. And I'm like, and he's like, if the shark said no to you before, then they're going to say no to you again. I don't know why you're here. And that didn't even make me flinch. I'm like, he's talking to somebody else. He's not talking to me. So needless to say, I go there and I go back, and I'm not thanking people, because there's so many people you pitch to. And guess what? 2 weeks later, I got the call or the email saying that you made it through the first
Wow.
round. And then, so every 2 weeks from
That's
June to November 20th, which is the day we recorded, we had a 2-week or sometimes twice a week call with the producers. And each time they would say, just because you made it to this round doesn't mean you're going to make it. And they kept saying it even beyond, even when they had flown us all the way to Los Angeles to record. And I guess it's true because they ask, they record what? They record 136 businesses and only 106 are shown. So some people didn't get shown. But if you want to see an exciting episode, I will say I was another first on the Shark Tank when they recorded my show. There was something that had never happened before in the history of Shark Tank. I think it's happened once or twice since, but I was the first in that episode
Okay.
as well. So you can go to socktabs.com.
And
So if you want to see the product, and then episode 709 on Hulu, if you want to see the episode.
there you go. Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes as a reminder, both for socktabs.com and the Hulu episode of Shark Tank.
Yes.
No, that's an awesome story, and just, and it also, kind of for the listeners, I think I don't want to gloss over it, but when you put your mind to it and it becomes part of your consciousness, I'm going to be on Shark Tank. You didn't even have a product at the time, and now, here, fast forward, you've got a product. It's a great product. It's a very useful product. I wish I'd have known about it. We have bags of socks that don't match in our house, and
Well, you don't have to any
I
longer.
can only, I know. Thanks to you. Thanks to you. So I do want to, and you've mentioned your former husband, or at least alluded to him a few times, and part of your journey was, as you said, married at a young age, married for 25 years, and that marriage did end, and so kind of not necessarily walk the listeners through your marriage, but what lessons did you learn from that
Yeah.
whole experience, and really what got you through it, Tracie?
Oh my
Because
gosh.
that's the, I
Yeah,
mean, our
that's-
listeners out there, they're going to go
Yeah.
through this. Yeah.
Well, I have always felt like if you give your whole heart to anything or to someone, then that's really all you can do, And I really believe in my whole heart that I gave my marriage everything that I had. And I guess in retrospect, my ex probably did too, you know? We both were I was 25, he was 30. And he had been married before. And, he had a certain look that he wanted, like in his mind, he wanted someone that, had a certain look that he would always want, I guess. And I guess I met that requirement. And then for me, I wanted someone that had a stable job that would give me a certain type of lifestyle. So we were perfect on paper. We were an amazing, we met each other's needs as shallow as they may have been. And so once I realized that I wanted a little more and that I deserved a little more, and I would just, say, hey, because I stayed at home for 9 years, which was a beautiful gift. And my job was to take care of everything else. And all my husband had to do was go to work and be great, because everything else I handled, the kids, the food, the properties, everything, And then eventually I went back to work as a pharmaceutical sales rep, but then I still was handling everything. Like he didn't lose any, I didn't lose any of my jobs. He didn't gain any more. And I felt overwhelmed and I needed more emotionally. And I would say, well, can you just do something nice for me? Can you plan a date? Can you send me flowers? And his response was, well, you ask me to do things that I'm not good at. I'm like, okay, well, just can you try? Now, of course, it's deeper than that. But he didn't really feel the urge to. And, I realized that there was some narcissism on his behalf, but there was also some codependency on my behalf, which I owned. And I kind of started to really equip myself with as much knowledge about narcissistic disorder, how it really is attached to a MTHFR gene in the brain. That's why folic acid and fish oil is all important. Like it's certain genes that and just a lot of leafy green vegetables when the brain development. I mean, this is just how much I've become like an expert on disorders, which is what kind of helped me understand how I was, a dependent on someone that I feel like probably didn't even know how to depend on themselves in a lot of ways. And so I said we were a
Right.
match made in hell. Like honestly, my goal was to please him, and his goals was to please for me to please him. And it's I don't I don't regret. I can tell you 5 years divorce or 5 years separated, and this is my fifth year. I can actually thank God for it, which is weird because I was sick. I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, that shows a lot of growth in you, and yeah, and it's a lot easier to say it than it is to do it. Um, you wrote in your book, and I'm gonna quote it. It says, "Your deepest pain point led you to understand your purpose." And maybe, maybe that speaks for itself, but if you wanna expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I was devastated when my marriage was dissolved. And I wanted my marriage. I didn't want to be a statistic. Um, and I felt like I was kind of just not being treated fairly. And I was really, really sad that God didn't intervene. And so, but I understand now that and this is really and maybe people aren't going to agree with this, but I really feel as though the Bible says you're not supposed to have any gods before God or put anything before God, money, other people. And I was so lost in trying to be responsible for my ex-husband's happiness that I feel like I had lost so much of who I was. And I remember realizing and saying that God did not create me to be someone's wife. I am God's child. There's so much more to me. And I had to learn that for myself because I felt as if you love someone completely unconditionally and you take vows and you do everything to serve them, that should be enough. Like who doesn't want that? And so the pain of having to see that dissolve, and then I remember being so frustrated with God and God told me a few things. He spoke to me 3 times. But he said the last time, I don't need your help. I was like, why aren't you fixing the situation? You're about unity. You're not about divorce. Like I was so mad. I was like, do something. And he said to me, as clear as I'm talking to you, I don't need your help. And so my purpose is to live the life that God has for me. And I had to
Right,
learn that through my experiences with losing my marriage, but finding myself.
right. So did that bring about a clear conscience at all?
Oh my gosh. Well, there's a phrase that I love, you know, um, that I got. I think I got it from one of the pastors that I've started that changed my life. His name is Pastor R.C. Blake's, and he's a YouTube phenom. But I found him when I was living in Rockford, Illinois by myself. I have this big house, dog, and then eventually it was just me and the dog. And I was just so alone and just kind of found, but again, I know God was directing me to him. But the phrase is, there's no softer pillow than a clear conscience. Because I had done it all. I had done it all. I had cried all the tears. And God said to me, He can't go where I'm taking you. But I see it now, which is why I said a couple minutes ago, 5 years later, I am grateful for it. Because as we know, God never closes a door and gives you less. Like, that's just not how it works. Like anything that you aren't getting now, like you think something or rejection is protection, that's another phrase because I begged and prayed and fasted. Like I would fast, I was praying, I would go to church, I would do the altar call, I would get on my knees, I prayed at night on my knees. I did it all because I know the power of God. But the point is, I'm happy God didn't bless me with what I thought I wanted. He wanted more for me than I could even want for myself, and that is what I know.
Wow. And here we are, you're talking to us from beautiful sunny California. So how does a young woman from the south side of Chicago make it all the way out to LA and become a sales superstar?
Done. Period. I mean, it's that
Yeah,
simple. Yeah.
that's
I mean,
it.
and that's what I tell my
Yeah.
kids. I need you to write something down and to dream so big so that when it happens, you'll know it only came from God. I dare you to do it. And that's where I am. I'm living this right now.
Y
I mean, I
so did you I mean, and that's a great exercise.
yeah, it is. And I'm still doing it.
Did you do that?
I'm
Good.
still because I believe it. Well, it's Habakkuk 2:2, which is also in the book. It talks about write it down on plain tablets and make it plain. So anybody that can see it can read it, and you just have to believe it and you write it down. And like I included it my list in my book. And the first was of a great 2 or 3 bedroom apartment in a warm climate because I hadn't decided if I was going to be LA or Atlanta. A warm climate with a great view. Well, when I first moved to LA, I was in a 2 bedroom apartment with this amazing view and a beautiful condo. And then 2 years ago, I just got a 3 bedroom apartment with an amazing view. And it's like, and of course, you don't realize it until later. It's like, wait a minute. I remember writing 2 or 3 bedroom apartment. Guess what? I got a 2 the first time and a 3. We have to be granular in what we write and what we believe because it really is God listening. And I really just want your listeners and anybody that I know to know this. You literally have to see it and you have to move as if it's already done. And that's exactly what I'm continuing to do. And I could not have done this if I had still stayed in the marriage that I was in that no longer was a blessing for me.
You, in your book, you talk a lot about your daily routine and how that is important to you, and maybe share a little bit about what you do and your mantra even, and how that helps you.
Well, I mean, my daily routine is essentially to try and stay grounded as much as I can because this world is challenging. It is so much happening that just is hurtful to my spirit. Um, it just really is. And so I try and listen to my daily Bible while I'm taking a shower. I literally put it on my ledge and I listen to, it's like the Old Testament, the New Testament, and then they, give you certain thoughts and you listen to it every day. And by the end of the year, you've, read the Bible, which I love. And then I also, listen to a lot of books, a lot of sermons. I find it's so important to feed my spirit in a way that is beneficial. Um, because you have to feed your soul. Like, because when life's challenges hit, you got to be able to figure out where to dig deep in getting, through it. And so that's feeding my soul constantly. So that's some of the stuff that I do. And I think you mentioned my mantra that I encourage people to
Yeah,
do for themselves because it's just a good thing. So when life comes at you, so it's something that I put, it's on page 82. Um, so when life kicks in, I remind myself of this. And my name is Tracie. And the T stands for trust God in all you do. The R says, remember all the challenges you've already overcome. Now, we've all prayed and we know that God has been there, but somehow or another, when we get a new challenge, it's almost like he has to start over from the beginning. No, we have to remember all the challenges that we've already overcome. A is accepts God's will and pray for understanding. Now, again, as I prayed for my marriage to be together, I prayed for not to be a divorced woman at 52 years old. That was no longer God's will. And I had to understand it. And that's something that, I've chosen to have that mindset about things because I do believe that God wants what is best for me. And now that I've accepted that, it's a little bit easier. So when things don't work out, I'm really okay with it. So that's the A. The C is check your emotions. It's not always what you think. And that's a fact because we can just automatically feel that someone did something or said something and get in our feelings and all that. And it's just good to have a temperature check on your emotions. It's intentional actions and intentional living are crucial. Be careful what you do. Always understand your intentions. And if it's not beneficial and it's going to be hurtful to somebody, don't do it. And then E is expectations of others must be managed. Now, that is a big one.
Yes.
Because if you don't have expectations of others, it's very difficult to be disappointed.
Say that again. So, yeah, that's worth repeating.
If you don't have expectations of others, then it's very difficult to be disappointed.
Right.
And that's something
Right.
that I've learned. And it's not easy to always remember, but it has boded well for me when I do think about it. Like, you know what? I'm just going to go in and just see what happens.
That's amazing. So, um, one of the things that in your journey, and you've alluded to it a little bit, and I know off the air you spoke to me about it, and I think this could be helpful for a lot of our listeners. You sought professional help in part of your journey here, and I know you wrote about it, but what kind of message would you want to send to the listeners about if they are in need of that professional help?
I think that the stigma and the shame around it is really unfair. I don't know a person in this world that's not dealing with problems or issues or trying to overcome things. And, I sought professional help in our marriage. But what I also realize is that if you're seeking counsel or if you're seeking professional opinion, you can just show up or you can really do the work. Okay. And my point is, you know, I wanted help. I wanted to understand my story. I wanted to understand why I made some of the choices that I made. How did I get here? In my marriage, what did I do to contribute to the demise of my marriage? It was very clear to me, you know, obviously what my has done, and I'm sure he has another side of the story, what I did. But I also wanted to take some ownership of how did I contribute and what did I do? And to me, that's where I spend most of my time. Like I wasn't after I got separated, I was not interested in dating. I would tell everybody I'm separated, which means I'm still married. Imagine me going out on a date with somebody and I'm still somebody's wife. Like I used my time wisely. I was not interested in getting back in a relationship. And that was just something that I realized I had to heal. I had to understand. And therapy for me was game changing because there was so much that I just didn't understand about the choices that I made, what it stemmed from. And it's just been a world of difference in having someone that is medically trained or, psychotherapy as well, trained on patterns, choices, and what it stems from. And it just, to me, allowed me to get closer on a track of trying to understand why and how and now what.
Yeah,
So
well, I think,
I would recommend that highly.
yeah, and I'm not a professional and I don't pretend to be at all, but I do think you're a living example of the benefits of it, and I mean, you're exuding um, confidence. You're exuding. You're doing God's will. All of the things that you wrote about and discussed, it's further testimony to the benefits of therapy and seeking professional help. So I appreciate you sharing that and kind of trying to break down some of the negative connotations of what is involved there and what it might be. It's not weakness. It's taking ownership and it's seeking recovery. And it's a journey, and it's a beautiful journey, and you're living proof. So thank you, Tracy, for doing that. I'm going to move on here a little bit, Tracy. You talk about you know you chose peace over you have patience and you chose peace, and you kind of you do live a joy-filled life, but it's devoted to God. And what does that mean for you now in your life out in LA? And I understand that your mother has moved out there. Is that correct?
And I'm grateful to be able to give this to her. Um, and
That's
I mean,
great.
I can just tell you that, my heart is so filled with joy and gratitude for all that God has given me, for every bit of it. Like, I honestly tell people when they're facing situations that I am not going to be ashamed of anything that God put me through. I am grateful for it. As we know, James 1 and 2 is what? Count it all joy. That's one of my favorite verses. Count it all joy. So it is. I am humbly grateful for the tragedy of so much that I thought I would never, ever get through. I was mad at God. I'm like, I did everything you told me to do. And this is where I end up. And I can see that, I heard another phrase, which I love. It was like, you know, the good news is that whatever you go through, God will be there for you. But the bad news is you're gonna need him. It's because he's gonna
Oh,
be there for
wow.
you, but that's the good and the bad of it. So I
Right.
can tell you that having a heart of peace, joy, and gratitude is, to me, where I'm trying to stay focused and where I'm trying to keep my center, because I just know that God is here for all of us to be a blessing. And we can see
Well,
any situation today that somehow or another something amazing can come from it. What the devil can start, as hate, God can turn to joy. And that's something else that I really know and believe.
wow, that's beautiful. I could talk to you forever. I want to be respectful of your time and our listeners here today. But before we close out, is there, I didn't know you've done such a wonderful job of explaining your journey and how powerful it is. So if the listeners want to find you, how do they find you and seek your wisdom and your guidance?
Yes. Well, I did create well, first of all, I don't know if this is allowed, my shameless plug. I do have my book here.
It's
It's
100% allowed.
So this is my book, and it's me in yellow, which is a color I didn't really wear a lot, but I knew that when I created this cover, I wanted something to be vibrant and just happy. And yellow, it's hard to be in yellow and with a bad attitude. So I have my nice little yellow outfit on, and it's called Survive and Succeed, as you mentioned, Bill, from a brain aneurysm to Shark Tank and how to trust in God's plan. This is my book. It's actually available on tracieburress.com, where if you want to order it, I've processed all my orders. I'd be happy to give a little signed copy
Oh,
as well, or you can do it on Amazon. It's also available. And then one of the things that my goal, because as a woman at 57 years old, and I was divorced at 52, as I mentioned, I met my ex at 25, married at 27, divorced at 52. The world was very different. And I just didn't know how to pick up and where to start. And I kind of feel like through my therapy, through a lot of things that I have experienced, coaching, I really can tell you that once again, God is faithful. He's so faithful. He will put things in front of you when you're ready to receive them. So I know I read about 70 books that first 2 years. And I remember like, wow, God, had I got this before, I probably wouldn't have got it. But the way things are positioned is when you're able to receive it. And I can tell you that I kind of have chronicled that. So if there are women or anyone in general that's had some challenges, again, you can go to tracieburress.com. My book is available. And one last thing, I kind of created a little curriculum for women that are trying to start over, and it's called
Great.
Ready to Be Loved. Not ready to love, ready to be loved, because there's a difference. And I really believe that God got me in a position where I was ready to be loved. And it's been an amazing journey, and I'm very, very grateful for
You
it.
you wrote this book, and it takes a lot of courage and drive and desire to tackle writing a book, but how did you do it? Like, what inspired you to do it, and what was your purpose behind it?
Well, my purpose behind writing the book is because it was a promise that I made to God that, I really wanted to be able to, cleanse a lot of what I was experiencing, a lot that I had not really shared or talked about. Like with my ex, we never really talked about much. We just kind of separated and divorced, and I felt like this book was going to be very cleansing, very purging. And, so I've not really been on like social media to try and monetize it or anything like that. I really felt that getting it out there would be beneficial to a lot of women, a lot of people that were starting over. And so I kind of just wanted to have that as something that, people would be able to use or see. So perhaps, getting on social media to promote this, because the people that have read it without fail have told me how much of an impact it has made and had on their lives. So, and I can actually tell you two men that I met a guy in Australia, okay? And I know he was in Los Angeles, but he was from Australia. And somehow or another, my book came up. And he said to me, wow, I was blown away by your faith. And that to me also was powerful. And then another guy, I was in London, and I told him about the book. And he literally right there went on Amazon, bought the book. And then later we talked. He says, I'm going to tell you, I don't know God, but the way you talk about him in this book makes me want to. And literally, I said, then that's exactly why I wrote it. So having that, and again, I'm not even really promoting it, but I know it's powerful. So I hope, people will select it and read it and get something out of it. That's my prayer.
Well, thank you, and thank you for writing it, and thank you for putting in all the work, it's really meaningful, and it's making an international impact, so
Yes,
that's
I know. I
great.
was so excited.
Right. So I do wanna go back to one of the things you said, and accepting God's plan, but on his at his speed. And my brother, he's the one that started this awesome podcast, and we're continuing his efforts. And he would always close it, and I'm not going to close it yet, but he would always say Godspeed. And I looked that up, just kind of just like, well, I thought it was a nice phrase. I think it's what the astronaut said back to mission control when they were, our mission control said to the astronauts when they were orbiting the Earth. And I asked Matt about it, and he says, "No, it's life is at God's speed, not my speed, not your speed. It's at God's." So it's another way of you saying it. y- When God presents it, it presents it on God's time. So I like that. So
I have never heard of that, Will. Thank you for breaking that
yeah,
down, because Godspeed in my mind even still means as quickly as it can happen. But no, I get that. It's God's time. Yeah. It's at his speed. Yeah, I
right,
love that. Right.
yeah, yeah. No, so that was great. So sock tabs, how do we find those?
So socktabs.com, very simple, very easy.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Basically, sock tabs is for anyone that has feet and wears socks. Do you know anybody like that?
I know a few, yeah. So
Anybody that
yeah,
has feet, wears socks, and has wasted time trying to keep, find the match, the mate, and then wasted money to buy more just to contribute to the problem. So sock tabs is a very simple solution. You wear one tab on one sock at all times. So as soon as you take your
right,
socks off, guess what you're doing? You're gonna match them up right there. So that way they go into the washer together, or into the hamper, then into the washer, and then guess what? They come out together. You don't have to wait on the back end to match them up. You match them right there where you are on the front end. And I can tell you that I've had so many people that's had some great success with it.
for our listeners, we'll have all this information in the show notes, but, socktabs.com and tracieburress.com. Um, so kind of before we close off here, um, my brother always reminded us to do 3 things every day to live life to the fullest. And, one was find something to be grateful for regardless of how powerful the storm is. Um, be truly present with those that you're with. And I think, Tracie, the third one you commented a lot on, and it's pay attention to what you're feeding your mind, your body, and your soul. So again, thank you to our guest, Tracie Burress. Thank you so much. To our listeners, remember to subscribe to the show, share it with friends. Also, please go to our website, withgratitudematt.org, and stay tuned for more information regarding our July 24th Toast to Gratitude. With Gratitude Matt listeners, until next time, find the courage to be grateful. Godspeed, my friends.